was already saying that this movement of unification was already in the church. This step of necessity in which we say we are, it is compared to a situation of the church. You know that the church has been created by our Lord Jesus Christ to transmit a certain deposit, a certain revelation, to this deposit of faith, and to reach all human beings from the beginning up to the end of the world, and in all nations. Jesus has come to save us from our sins and to give us a message. A message that was given out by our Lord. This is why in the church we value this transmission. And we have two ways of transmission to this origin. We know all Bible. Bible is one way to connect to the revelation. And as you know, Bible cannot change because Bible was written a long time ago. And of course, if the Pope today wanted to modify one page of the Bible, how can you modify the Bible? The Bible is the Word of God, and there is no way someone can modify it. And that all of us can understand that very well. We say it's not only Bible, it's also what we call tradition. And tradition is also the source of revelation, a way for us to know what has been given at the beginning. Tradition has also passed the content, and for us, Catholics, it's normal to adhere to this source of our revelation. Bible and tradition. What we saw recently in the Council Vatican II was a kind of changing. Something became different. The Council Vatican II wanted to update the Church to the modern times, to make it more of its own epoch, adjusted to the modern times. And for that, it has tried to update the Church. And this update of the Church we have seen it in action in Vatican II and after Vatican II. They cannot compare. But the differences are there. And this is why we had a reaction during the Council Vatican II. Almost 250 bishops were in reaction about what they could see. These modifications were not so visible for many people. Why? Because there were a bit of theory. And a theory consequences in mathematics. And someone is changing one value somewhere. Most of us will not see the problem. Okay? We will not see the implication of this value somewhere because we are not mathematicians, because we are not physicians. and we will not see the implication. But the professional, they can see. And this was the case of Bishop Lefebvre and some other bishops in the council. They could see the modification, and they could see the consequences of this modification. For us, we have kept three main points in the council. You see, we have seen the modification. I will just some example. Traditionally speaking, we were always saying the Catholic Church is the Church of Jesus. That was the traditional principle, thesis. The Catholic Church is. In Vatican II, because they wanted to be more open to other religions, they modified this statement by the Church of Jesus subsists in the Catholic Church. Just add one word, subsist. Subsist. Before it was a perfect adequation. The Catholic Church is the Church of Jesus. Now we say the Church of Jesus subsists in the Catholic Church. Maybe some people will not really see the value of this in. But if you are a theologian, or even a philosopher, or even if you understand well English, it's really speaking to you. Because if the Church of Jesus subsists in the Catholic Church, maybe it can also subsist out of the Catholic Church. And now when you just accept this sentence in the Council of Vatican II, you actually open the door to accept that the Church of Christ can be present in other religions. Of course, they are not saying that maybe this way, so explicitly, but they open the door. And after what is happening is what we have seen recently, this lady who pretended to be the archbishop, an archbishop, who is received in the Vatican. She is dressed like a bishop. She is received by the Pope. She is received by cardinals. She is giving a blessing to the cardinals. And there is a blessing very devoted. This is a consequence of this service. Okay? It means these other denominations are also valued, accepted, recognized somehow. Not at the same level, maybe, but still they are accepted, they are received, and they are considered. Another point that was very, very important for us was this point that we call religious liberty. Because for us, what we stand that Jesus is God, and Jesus established his own religion, is finite. God himself comes in this world to establish his own religion. What else do you wait for? You have everything. You have the religion of God himself. And we believe the Catholic Church is the religion established by Jesus. And this is the right one. This is the good one. This is the only one. And during 2000 years, the Church has been so clear about it, there is only one religion. Remember why the first Christians got problems. They were persecuted for 3 centuries. Why? Not because they were bringing a new God. Because in Rome, they were welcoming all the gods of all nations. They were not afraid to receive Jesus, okay? Because they had. And they were used actually when they could conquer a new province to adopt the God of this province. The persecution was not to recognize and to accept a new God. The problem is this God was saying all the other ones are fake and they have no legitimacy and will refuse to honor them and to sacrifice to them. And even if the Roman Emperor himself pretends to be a God, he will tell you that as a human being, go down, please. Okay? And they will refuse to sacrifice to the Roman Empire. Because of that, they got into trouble and even they had to suffer martyrdom. And during 3 centuries, the devil has really tried to delete the Church of Jesus. But you can see why the Catholic Church was persecuted. Because it was saying, we are the only one, the only religion. Jesus is the only God. All the other ones are devils. Okay? And this is why the Catholic Church was. And you can see the spirit today. It's a bit the spirit to say, actually the Pope himself said that in Singapore, Pope Francis, 3 years ago, something like that. He said to the youth, don't say my religion is better than your religion, because all the religions are a way to go to God. You can see this spirit is the spirit of there is no truth. There is no one true religion, but we are back to this Roman Empire when we are accepting all the gods of every nation, and all of them they have to learn how to live together and not try to say I am the true God. And we are back at this moment where, when Jesus speaks about truth to Pilate, Pilate answers, what is truth? What is truth? And today, you say there is one true religion, people will answer you, what is truth? There is no true religion. And don't say, my religion is better than your religion. Because all religions are a way to go to God. And this is totally not Catholic. Okay? That is in total opposition to the teaching of the Church for 2000 years. And why is it so difficult for us to accept that? It is so difficult for a very good reason. This good reason is, if all religions are a way to go to God, it means the religion of Jesus is one option among other options. Okay? Maybe you can think it's a better option, because you are free to think what you want. But, and you can choose it because you think it's a better option. But today you are not allowed to say it's the only option. For Francis, he said, don't say it's the only option. Don't say my religion is better. And if the religion of Jesus is an option, it means, concretely speaking, that Jesus himself is an option. And if Jesus himself is an option, he is not God. Because God is not optional. God is necessary. You have one is necessary and one is contingent. What is contingent is optional. It can be or not to be. Okay? It's optional to be a baker, or to be a butcher, or to be a teacher. It's an option. It's okay. You can choose your path. No problem. But God is not one option among other options. God is necessary. That is the definition of God. Even a proof of the existence of God is to say he is necessary. Now, when you say don't say my religion is better than your religion. Maybe you say Jesus is not God. Maybe you don't say that. Blank. Jesus and God cannot. Thus, Jesus is not God. Practically. What is this religious liberty? This religious liberty is the fact to give the same right to all religions. In the council, in the Schismatic, they have been saying every person has the right to practice the religion according to his conscience. It means he has a right. We give a right to what is right, to what is good. We don't give a right to what is wrong. Okay? There is no right for wrong. There is no right for bad. There is only a right for what is good and true. Now when with Schismatic we want to give a right to all religions, and not only a right to live personally, but even to organize the society according to your faith. Like the Sharia, the Islamic Sharia is actually the organization of the society according to the Muslim teaching. And Vatican II, in Schismatic, recognized to a religious community the right to organize their social life according to their faith. It's a right. It means it is good. It is recognized as good. Before we have never said it. We said only the Catholic religion has a right because only Jesus is God and there is only one true religion. Was the right. After other religions, of course they are there. And we have, of course, to deal with them. We are not going to kill everybody because they are not Catholic. Okay? We are not going to chase them out of the country because they are not Catholic. If they are there, and we have to live together. Okay? In the same way. And now, the Catholic state can tolerate, say, okay, I am a Catholic president of Kenya, and very Catholic, there is only one religion, it is the Catholic religion. But in my country, there are a number of communities that are there, and they exist, you know, they are there. And now we have to live together and to organize the country with these other religions who are there. And they need some churches, they need some mosques. Okay, maybe it is reasonable to let them establish the church, the mosque. But as a Catholic, you don't say they have the same right in the Catholic Church. You say they are wrong religions, but they are there, and I have to deal with them. Okay? But of course, if you are in a 100% Catholic country, that was the case of many countries before Vatican II, you are the president of the country, you are Catholic, all your country is Catholic. And now you have a Protestant pastor who wants to open a church. And now you tell him, no. And we don't want to introduce a false religion in our country when there is no need, for that. Okay? And now you deny because they don't have a right to open a church because their religion is a false religion. They don't have a right to open a church. You understand the difference between a right and something we have to tolerate because we cannot remove it like that. Okay? The opportunity to remove it without affecting the common good, you can do it. Okay? And you can try to reduce the influence of a community. This community has a wrong religion, and you want to reduce the influence of this community. It's reasonable to do it. You can do it. You are not putting the the country in fire. Okay? Actually, it happened in France after the War of Religions. We had a very, very long wars of religion between Catholic and Protestant, and we could conclude this war by their places. They were not allowed to go everywhere. They were limited to some cities, to some provinces, because they were there and we were fighting since so long, and we had to stop this war. I said, okay, let us stop fighting. You settle here, here, and here. Don't go where you are not, okay? Stay where you are. We tolerate you like that, because we need to end the war. But 1 century after, a king, Louis XIV, said there is no more reason to tolerate these people. And he removed the Edict of Tolerance to recover the unity of his country with one religion. Because you know, when you have two religions in one country, somehow you are losing the unity of the country. For him, he wanted to recover the unity of the country again under the Catholic Church, and he said no more reason to tolerate Protestants. And now we call them, now, or you integrate to our society by becoming Catholic, or you leave the country. This is what he did. Okay? He removed this Edict of Tolerance. Because he was thinking there is no need currently, we can do it. Actually, this is how you have French wine in South Africa, because many farmers were Protestant, were cultivating wine, and they had to exile from France, and some went to Holland, the Protestant country, and from Holland they even went to South Africa. But that is to explain you what was the Catholic doctrine in terms of there is right only for the Catholic religion, and we tolerate the religions that are not true religion. Vatican II, by giving a right, an equal right to all religions, put all religions on the same stand. And Jesus equal to Muhammad, equal to Buddha, equal to Hinduism, and that is acceptable for Catholic hearts because it means that Jesus is not more God than someone else. Okay? And that is unacceptable. So, but today it has become extremely common. Remember what happened when Anglicanism started in the 16th century. Henry VIII wanted to divorce and get married to Anne Boleyn. The Pope said no. You are married, there is no way. He said, let me make my own religion. I will become the chief of the Anglican Church. And everybody has to follow me. All the bishops left one, follow the king in civil. Okay? All of them. Left one. Fisher. St. John Fisher. Who died as a martyr actually, not to follow the king in schism. Because he wanted now to be the chief of the national church, and the Pope was not in the picture anymore. Okay? It was now the national church, and he was the chief of this national church. And the bishop had to report to him, and not to the Pope. That was the schism. You can see how his life, all the bishops of England have accepted. they created this Anglicanism. St. Thomas More was the Chancellor of England at this moment, refused completely, and he was also condemned to death, and he's a martyr. At this moment, you could die as a martyr not to recognize Anglicanism. Okay? And the Pope was firm about it. And today we receive the Archbishop of Canterbury in Rome, and she can bless the cardinals, and nobody has a problem with that. And the Pope is the one receiving her. With a lot of, and the letter he wrote to her when she was appointed Archbishop there, we wish we could receive such a letter. Because it was very kind. Yes. But for us, we are receiving beatings. Okay? Yeah. That is to show you that there is a difference. There is a third point in Vatican II that has always been pointed. We call it collegiality. For a while, it was a little more difficult to understand what was the value. And sometimes the priest is very afraid because he is not free. He is not really free to run the parish. Mainly in Europe, in Kenya, the priests are strong compared to what we see somewhere else. But still, this collegiality was not really well understood. This is a problem, not very well understood. It was to give more power to the bishops together, to have to have a culture that is less a monarchy, but more a kind of democracy, more democratic church. Because this final church is exactly this democracy in the church. It is actually an attempt to change the constitution of the Catholic Church from a monarchy to a democracy. When you have an assembly of faithful and you ask them to decide what will be the way forward for the church, this is now the faithful to vote. We want that, we want that, we want to go this way. For us in our culture, we want that. We want people who are living in polygamy and they are living peacefully with their wives, to be able to receive the Eucharist. We want women to be ordained priests, at least deacon. We want gay couples to receive the blessing of marriage. And these things are already there, completely, in Germany. And you have, in the month of June, you have so many mass for gay pride, you know, masses with the rainbow flag, and bishop, priests, openly supporting the gay representation in the Catholic Church. And more than that, we know that the Pope himself, with Amoris Laetitia, authorized the priest to bless the marriage of gay people. I know it was not received well in Kenya. Even the bishop in Kenya were not happy with that. No, not in Kenya, even in Africa generally. And Bishop Amero made a very good letter to say, no, this is not acceptable. So you can see, even the Bishop of Africa, they have to recognize there is a problem in the church, and we have to oppose the Pope. And they said, no, for us, we cannot apply that. And they were concerned, actually. And I met some priests, they were concerned, what's happening in Rome? How can the Pope authorize to bless gay people want to get married? You know, that was really understood as a problem, even by the priest and the bishop, and they had to oppose the Pope. And that is to show you that there is a contradiction, there is a change. After we have the change in the liturgy, that are very, very, very manifest. You have a quantity of abuse in the new liturgy. You have a quantity of modifications. You have removed so many genuflections. You have removed the altar. You have put a table in place of the altar. That is a big change, you know. To remove the altar and put a table is to switch from Catholic sacrifice to the commemoration of the Last Supper for the Protestants. We have many changes. Now, what do you do with these changes? These changes can be of two different kinds. A modification can be essential or accidental. If a modification is accidental, it means it doesn't change the core of what is modified. Okay? If we want to repaint this hole in cream or in ivory, it's not a destruction of the hole. It is just an accidental modification of the color of the walls. Okay? It's accidental. If now we want to transform this hall in a church, it becomes essential. No, the hall is not a church. It becomes something completely different. It's a church now. It's an essential modification. It's not anymore for entertainment or meeting. Now it is a church. It is essential. Now, these modifications we have seen in the church, are they affecting the core of the Catholic Church, or are they only accidental modification, the one that can happen in the life of the Church? Of course, we have accidental modification. Pope John the 23rd wanted to add in the canon of the Mass the name of Saint Joseph. And he did it, and now we say in the Mass, we have the name of Saint Joseph in the canon of the Mass. This is a modification of the Mass. Okay? Is it a substantial modification? Is the Mass completely different? Or is it an accidental modification? Of course, it's an accidental modification. The Mass are not changed completely because we have added the name of Saint Joseph in the canon. We can accept accidental modifications if, because they are only accidental. But when now the substance is affected, this is where we have to stop to say, no, now you are changing the church itself. Okay? Now you are changing the dogma of the church. Now you are changing the pastoral of the church. Before we are trying to convert Protestants and tell them you have to become Catholic, if not you will not be saved. And today we don't try to convert. We dialogue, we speak together, we learn from them, and after Vatican II, you have some Carmelite monks or sisters who have been receiving Hindu monks or Buddhists to teach them how to pray. This is ecumenism. Buddhism is something called prayer. And maybe we can also share with them how we pray. And then we learn from each other. It is a substantial change in the pastoral of the church. Before the pastoral was clear. There is only one church, and you have to go back to it. All the Protestants have to come back home. Catholic Church. Today, some pastors, they really try to become Catholic. They were denied. No. Today, you should not convert. You should stay where you are, and we have good relationship, and we discuss together. It is outstand. It is outstand with the sovereignty. Is to say no, it was abusive. And today, we see it too clearly because the fruits are there today. You can see this At the beginning, it was just to add two words in a sentence to this in. But now, when you see the picture of Herschel in the group of the faithful represented from Twitter, from X, the picture, the image of this pseudo-archbishop lady received in Rome. You see it physically. And even in Kenya, it's not only a road. In so many parishes in Kenya, you can have men who are sitting in the parish committee, and they are polygamy, and they are receiving communion. That is just accepted already in practice. Okay? But you have seen the problem with the priest recently somewhere in Kenya. This is a bit of a problem we have everywhere. You know? We see the fruits now. We see this modification. I took time to go back to that because if we don't understand that there is a substantial modification and that we cannot accept it, that we have the duty to continue what we have been given. Of course, this duty to continue for you, your duty for you is to keep the faith. Like Father Pagliani was saying in the letter. To continue this duty. I have to do it. Okay? This is my duty. Now, what is the duty of a bishop? The duty of a bishop is to ordain priests who will continue to do what is right, who will continue to teach you the truth, who will continue to give you the good sacraments, the good mass, confirmation, and the good priest. You know? No, your duty is to keep the faith as you have received. My duty is to teach you catechism, to give you the sacraments, to say mass for you, to confess you, to spend hours in the confessional for you. It is my duty. And give you the sacrament properly, and the doctrine properly, and the proper guidance. Now, what is the duty of the bishop? Is to give you good priests. Okay? And this is why our bishop, they had to consecrate new bishop. Because there is no church without bishop. You know? Priests, we are not enough. Because one day I died. Stay faithful to our mission. And this is why we have to proceed with consecration in order to continue to do what is good, to do what is right. For you, for the church. And of course, it's a good action. It's a good action that we have done. Because we transmit the faith, we transmit the sacraments, and we have done a good action. And you can never be punished for a good action. You can be punished for a bad action, but not for a good one. Donc the episcopal expression without the mandate of the Pope were not understood before as a schismatic act. That is something that is been invented for Bishop Lefebvre. Okay? Before it was not understood like that. The penalty of excommunication was given only in 1951 to prevent China to create a national church led by the Communist Party. This is why Rome said to the bishop in China, don't consecrate bishop for the national church of China. Okay? And if you do it, you will be excommunicated, because actually you will create a parallel church in China, and we don't want that. And Rome put an excommunication to prevent the creation of the patriotic church, as we call it today. But it has never been said before that to consecrate the bishop without the permission of the Pope was an act by nature schismatic. It was maybe a disobedience, or maybe a good initiative if you had to do it. It could be punished actually by a suspense. Okay, suspense at divinity. You had a punishment for the bishop who were doing that, and that is quite recent also. It's from the Middle Age. Okay, before the Middle Age, it was totally okay for a bishop to consider another bishop even without the knowledge of the Pope. It's just ecclesiastic right and law. Donc, for us to consecrate bishop is not at all to consecrate a parallel church. We have no intention to consecrate, to make a parallel church. We totally recognize the Pope and we are under the Pope. We obey him. We obey him because we respect the canon law in so many aspects. We respect the canon law. And the canon law is the will of the Pope. We are obedient to the Church. In some aspects, we say no because now it's opposing the tradition of the Church. Okay, this is briefly, or not briefly, I don't know, what I wanted to expose. Now, we can, okay, I have prepared a number of material about the state of necessity, about obedience. I have many different things, but I can use them in case of a question is coming on a certain topic, okay? To dive in more in one question, like obedience or state of necessity. But maybe we could move to some question and answer. If you have some, it's totally welcome to have some questions if you want us to dive more in one problem. Maybe you can write. We are going to issue some paper where people can write the questions and we will answer them. Meanwhile, I can explain you a bit the state of necessity. If you see, necessity is rooted in the natural law. Thomas Aquinas is telling us that the goal of the law is a common. When you establish a law, you want it to benefit to the society. And sometimes a specific law is not helpful. If I tell the children they are not allowed to run in the building, that is for good order. Okay? But of course, if there is a fire, maybe it's good to start running. Okay? So the general law will not apply because of a certain circumstance. Okay? The goal of the law is a common good. But if a specific law is not serving the common good at a certain stage, it has no more value. Okay? At some moment, it is what St. Thomas called epikeia. Epikeia is a part of the virtue of justice, where we understand that there is a special situation that is not planned for by the common laws. Okay? And now you have to apply your prudence and apply the principle in order to still reach the common good, but maybe not obeying the law exactly. Because a law cannot plan for every kind of detail. Okay? This is why necessity comes when something has not been planned by the law, and now you have to apply prudence. To understand what was the goal of the law, and not to apply it. We have a very good example in the life of the church. In the past time, a priest could not confess validly out of his diocese. He could only confess in his diocese. Out, he was not allowed. But of course, if he was out of his diocese and he sees someone dying and he is the only priest, the church said, now the law is not there anymore. Okay? Now you give him absolution. Because there is necessity. And necessity is more important than this other law that was there. That was the goal of this law. But when you have a need for exception, you can apply an exception. It's what we call a state of necessity. And Jesus has said that himself. The man has not been made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath for the man. It means the law is for the sanctification of man and not to prevent the sanctification. You are correcting. And the supreme law of the church is the salvation of the soul. All the laws we have in the church are there to help us to serve the soul better. Okay? And this is why we have so many directives that we have to respect in order to serve the soul, to sanctify the soul better. But if now one law prevents the sanctification of the soul, it has no value because it's not reaching the final goal of it. This is why when we consecrate these bishops, we don't reject the papacy, we don't reject the Pope, we don't say the Pope has lost his office, we don't say that we have to create a parallel church, we don't say that we deny the primacy of the Pope, but we say that extraordinary circumstances justify an extraordinary act for the preservation of tradition and peace. We are not in schism, creating a parallel church, but we are in a state of necessity where we have to act for the sake of the church. We were to have now time for questions. Maybe we could come with the panelists who have planned. Father James, Gregory, Manuel can bring a chair on the stage, and we can try to answer some questions. That's the reason why I can because of the
it was not because they worship Jesus Christ simply, because they would have just been allowed to worship Christ if he was just one among the gods. The problem is that they say Christ was only true God. And so Vatican II comes and says, and which I know many Catholics, if they took their time and looked at the errors that SSPX is raising, most Catholics would actually agree with society. The issue is that the society is the only congregation being forced to sign a document to accept these doctrines. When the Carmelites want to register themselves in Kenya, they're not told they have to sign a document saying that they accept all the elements of the Second Vatican Council. Why is it not being given to the society? No other congregation is given such conditions for recognition. It has never been in the Catholic faith that for you to be Catholic, you must accept all religions to be God. It has never been so. And this is why the society finds itself in the position it is in. It's not simply because a dialogue was the day before the consecration, the Pope calls for a dialogue. Yet, for many months, he has been meeting with other people. James Martin met with him, Father James Martin, and the Anglican bishop met with him. But what was crucial at that moment was not maybe most important to him as it was to us. We don't know. But the fundamental problem with the Second Vatican Council is this teaching on religious freedom. And that has always been placed as a condition for the society to be accepted or to be recognized. And so it's like to accuse actually the society of disobedience and schism in this sense. It's kind of accusing the martyrs of suicide. Any martyr, if he was told, or if she was told, please, just leave and go back home to your family, they'll be happy to go back home. None of them are suicidal, they're not there looking for death. They died because they defended the faith of our Lord Jesus Christ. So that is the fundamental reason. It's because any dialogue that would proceed from Rome was actually just, again, give the same conditions. And after the excommunication, so-called excommunications, they came out again with the same conditions. For you to be brought back to the church, accept the Second Vatican Council and the legitimacy of the Mass. It's actually terrible. And it would be intellectual dishonesty if I would go and write this letter so that the bishop can recognize me. Actually, and have a temporal good and abandoning the term good. You cannot, in good faith or in good conscience, say that you are a Vatican Council, yet it is not true. In the same week when conservations happened, there was a group, a pro-life group, and a popular, let me say, a Catholic, said in the group after someone shared a very violent attack by Muslims towards Christians, I think in Nigeria. And he says, surely and certainly, we Catholics, we Christians and Muslims don't worship the same God. But the Second Vatican Council says, we together with the Muslims worship the same God. So if this communication is for Catholics who do not accept all the elements of the Second Vatican Council, then automatically this Catholic is also excommunicated, yet it doesn't come to Mass at Holy Ghost. So fundamentally, this problem is not just about the Latin Mass, because the elements say the traditional Mass. Yes, there are many places where the traditional Mass is being offered, but I would say with a bit of compromise. It is not enough just to say, as long as we have our Latin Mass, the church can go ahead and sign that document saying that they accept all the teachings of the Second Vatican Council and the doctrine of the Catholic faith. And that's why you see some recent ideology where they say, oh, it's not about the Latin Mass versus the new Mass, it's just we prefer. And they talk of the Latin Mass as the beautiful Mass, as if it's something. Today's world, when we talk about beauty, beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, it's subjective. I find it beautiful, you don't, I will go for the Latin Mass, you feel free to go to the new Mass. Because it's just the beautiful Mass. But for SSPX, it is not only the beautiful Mass, it is the true Mass. When you start talking of truth, now there is no mean, there is no in between. It's either true or false. When you talk of good, there is no in between. It's either good or bad. But beauty has this in between. Like the incense, the bells, the vestments, Latin, it sounds beautiful, it can go. It's no longer about my subjective preference. And that is the position of the society. It's not just about us. It's the goodness of the Mass, the entire divine veracity of God. God is truthfulness itself. So there is no contradiction in God. That is why there is a big abyss between the position of the Vatican and the Society of St. Pius.
Necessary that ordination of priests and bishops be done by the Society of St. Pius bishops only, and not those conciliar church bishops. The question is asking if the Society of St. Pius then can be open that our own priests, sometimes bishops, be ordained. The post-church prefer that our ordinations of priests be done by our own bishops. First of all, because we are praying for the Latin. The current situation, no bishop of the Apostolic Church. For us. Or if we did, we do not be familiar with the rites of the traditional ordination. So for us, we prefer that our own bishops do our own ordinations. We know, like the fraternity of St. Peter, it depends with the consider bishops for their priests, because that's the arrangements they have done. For us, we have not compromised on that, because even the sermons that are delivered in these ordinations matters a lot for us. Arrangements and agreements that we do not speak against the council, we do not speak about the errors of Vatican II. So, yeah, we have some good bishops. Traditional, but still we will not do it for us. We will not be authorized by Rome to do it. We don't know what will have happened if, let's say, Bishop Snyder or another modern bishop, if we came to the conclusion is every bishop in the Catholic Church can ordain or consecrate bishops in the Catholic Church. And why not in the SSPS? He can answer that question. In the Catholic Church, there are two codes of 1917, which was codified by Pope Pius X, and also we have the code of 1982, 83. So the one of 1917, it was not a new code of canon law. It was a correction of the laws of the church codified in one book. Collection of many centuries. And now, after Vatican II, the church had renewed many things. The Mass, the Catechism, a code of canon law which is more suitable for the modern church changes. When we, in the seminary, we stress more on the code of 1917, because we see it's more accurate and more expressing the traditional Catholic faith. But we don't say that we neglect the one of 1983. Sometimes we use it if it's not contradicting the faith. So we don't reject it, we use both the 1917 and 1983. Especially why it's not really necessary to stress too much about the. Thank you very much.
Okay, so the question here is that one that's. Okay, so this probably would have avoided excommunication. I think that is only if the consecrations had never happened to begin with. It's not a matter of waiting a little longer.
Yes.
So, why did the society not wait a little longer? Because the crisis which Father had been describing has deepened. It has only deepened as the years and decades have passed by. And so it's in a real state of emergency. And at some point, a good physician has to take measures to deal with a situation of emergency. So it's it's tempting to think that, okay, one looks at the reign of Pope Leo to think he's only been Pope for 1 year, so then it looks like there's been a rush. But one has to look at it. Got a mass impact, so crisis to be dealt with. There were moves happening, for example, the document last year that demoted Our Lady and her titles, you know. So there are signs that the church has been, that the SSPX that were happening. So, for example, Bishop Tizzy passed on. We know already Bishop Williamson was no longer in the society, so there are only 2 bishops left in the society, having to cover the entire world, going around for confirmations, going around for ordinations of priests. And it's quite a toll when you try and understand the type of schedule that the 2 bishops were facing. And so they're getting on in years, they're getting old. And so there was really a need to have continuity, to have new bishops, to be able to take on the work which is quite extensive that the bishops have to do, the ordination of priests, the confirmation, and all the other tasks that the bishop do. So those are really emergency, and things are not getting better in the church. And there were signs that things were not improving under Pope Francis, and therefore the SSPX felt the need. Waiting a little longer would only have led to things being worse, or maybe the bishops not being around anymore, and those sorts of challenges. So Father Bagherani and his council then made a prudential decision that this was the right time to go ahead with these consecrations, of course, after a lot of prayer. And one can imagine looking at it as decades, or from 1988 until now, that probably some of them felt that it was actually taking too long to consecrate new bishops. So, yeah, I think that's how I respond to that. There's another question about Vatican II, saying that Vatican II was considered a pastoral council, not a dogmatic nor an ecumenical council. Maybe the mothership of a synod cannot. Okay. Canonically, but in terms of principle, weakened the faith and prepared the world to accept watering down in terms of the sacraments, to accept watering down in terms of the liturgy. So, and again, it's not the whole of Vatican II. The liturgy. We know, as we know, that Protestants were invited in to give suggestions about the changes to the Mass so that it would be less offensive to them. language that sacrifice is not so much canonically as in terms of the principles and the spirit that's being changed to prepare people to accept the changes later on.
Is anyone wants to answer some few questions? We have planned for the date. We have already planned to do it, and after we ask for permission. Actually, it's not the case. We started to ask for permission long time before to try to see if one could answer our demand. But we got no answer from them. They were not at all because they were not answering. You can always watch online math, okay? That is good because you choose for a crowd or any other good traditional math where we have good sermon, good church, and you can participate, unite yourself to this mass. Of course, you can still read the mass in your missal. You know that you have the obligation to go to mass on Sunday, but of course, the obligation is not reasonable. If you cannot reach the mass, you cannot reach the you stay at home with your missal, you read the mass, and attend online mass. It's not really a real mass online. You have not attended mass, but it's a good option. So still you follow the mass of the day, you have the sermon, you have the announcement, you keep in touch with your parish of origin. If your child moves in another country where there is no traditional mass, what should you advise them to do? I think if we really understand our religion, we will try to move in a country where we have the mass. Okay? This is important. If we can, if we have a choice, we try to go where we have a good Catholic life, a good spiritual life. Of course, it can still happen that is not possible, and we have to go in a country where there is no such a mass. I think that the best is to do the same that in the first place, is to try to find a traditional mass or to follow online this mass. It's good still to you need the sacraments, you need to sometimes to do the effort, to reach to a mass. The problem of the new mass is it has been made with a wrong intention. To remove from the Catholic mass was displeasing Protestants. It means the more we get used to the new mass, the more we are engaged to lose faith. And this is a reality actually. This is why we don't recommend to be exposed to the new mass. If your spouse is asking that you should go back, I imagine, to Novo Sordo, due to the excommunication, what should we do as a family? And it's a difficult question, but let us always remember that God is even more important than a human being. Let us try to establish things on what is right as much as possible. To do what is wrong to please a human being or for the family is not a real solution. It will not even last. I will really encourage you to do what is right. It means to say no, there is no excommunication actually. And let me bring you the traditional mass. The question about exorcism, because you know we need the permission of the bishop to do the great exorcism. Actually, it's not really the permission of the bishop, it is the permission of a diocesan priest. His ordinary is the local bishop. For congregation, like our congregation, ordinary is our superior general, who could give us the power needed in case. The society's strategy to fight the excommunication. Actually, we don't fight it because it doesn't exist. But we have seen that this week actually our surveyor has applied for an appeal. Okay? We have not spoken much about it because it's a canonical disposition. No, if we contest, there is a right way to do it in the church, is to appeal. Yes, we appeal. Okay? And I think it will be quite interesting actually, and probably quite embarrassing for them also, because I think that they are not really very well. Okay? They have rushed on it, and actually what they have done is not making sense. There are some very serious canonists who say that it's impossible that the priest and the faithful are excommunicated. It's totally impossible. You need a personal declaration from the Vatican for each one. It's totally impossible. They are messed up. And you know, there's a decree of excommunication that is targeting only the 6 bishops involved. Okay? And after you have the explanatory notes. And now this note that they say that also the faithful are excommunicated. That is not a decree. It's just a note, you know, and the note has no power to excommunicate the faithful. Okay? They are messed up. They are messed up this process, and the fact to appeal will probably force them to review a bit their copy. But maybe they will not even receive at all of the appeal. And for us, we have not spoken much about it because it's not our main argumentation. Can you see? Our argumentation is deeper than the argumentation of canon law. For us, we speak about doctrine, we speak about faith, we speak about sacraments. Canon law is a superficial layer compared to faith and sacrament. That's why the way we explain we are not excommunicated is mainly in regard to the state of necessity in which we are continue to do what is right for the souls. Canon law.
So the next question is, I think it has been answered by from Father. That's what the claim was. Will you ever abandon the faithful in Kenya in case you face hostility or KCCP? So as Father said, and we can do that in 3 ways. apostasy, if you refuse the faith itself, and if you cut yourself off from the Pope, and basically, or even cut yourself from other Catholics, that is also schismatic. And actually, there is one of the who says, does not cut itself from the entire Catholic Church, but they themselves cut themselves from the valid. Three, so at that time there were no aeroplanes as today, and easy movement from one place to the other. So when St. Eusebius, as a bishop, when he traveled from one place to the other, he consecrated a bishop in that place so that he can continue giving the sacraments in that place. And even the faith thought that these were actually the real bishops, but they made it clear that they were not trying to usurp the authority. It's only because that there was a kind of limitation of movement that they needed to consecrate so many. So St. Eusebius and St. Athanasius bishops for the sake of conferring the sacraments during the Arian crisis. And the reason why they were doing that without papal mandate was because that the condition for union at that time was for you to profess in the Mass an Arian creed. So you see the way we say the creed after the sermon, there came a creed that was actually denying the divinity of Christ. And this creed was the one that you had to recite in the Mass. And this creed was so-called the one approved, the formula that was approved by the Arian bishops. St. Athanasius, St. Eusebius, and St. Paulinus, all of them rejected that creed. And because of that, they were never allowed to exercise their jurisdiction. Another bishop called Eusebius, not a saint, another bishop was an Arian, called Eusebius, came and overthrew St. Athanasius from his diocese. And so they went into an underground church. And at that time, the ones who were in the so-called the mainstream church were mainly the Arian bishops. 90% of the bishops say they were Arian. Only a few percentage of the bishops were Catholic. And among these 10% that remained, a minority, an even smaller minority, was actually vocal and actually acting against, in this sense, by continuing to consecrate bishops, ordaining priests, giving confirmations and baptisms in the underground church. And when St. Athanasius wrote to the faithful at that time, he told them and asked them a question in a letter: which is better, the churches or not commission? And I've given the example of our Lord Jesus Christ before Pilate. Not suddenly become guilty by Pilate. The mind does not change by every letter and the position of SSPX has not changed since 1970. It does not change. It's a constant. Yet, at one time, another time they are not, another time excommunicated, another time full communion, depending on who's in charge. So Pope Francis comes and says, they're Catholic. I give them another Pope comes and take them away. It's still the same. Do you really think God changes like that? One of the attributes of God is immutable. It does not change from one thing to the other. Right? And the virtue which Christ has given the confessors of the faith. The confessor, I don't mean Christian confession. Those who keep the particular virtue is constancy. When we have the Mass of our confessor, the particular virtue, the exemplary and heroic virtue possesses constancy. And that's what we see in the faith. I'll keep the faith when it is encouraged, and I'll keep it when it is discouraged. Otherwise, we become like water. When it's cold, we freeze and become solid. When it's hot, we turn to air and disappear. So when things are bad, will I still remain Catholic when things are bad, or will I be Catholic only when it's convenient? There is a statement that Bishop Fulton Sheen says that I think it was in the 40 years ago, 50 years ago, everyone was Catholic. Even the air was Catholic. Because the whole environment preserved you in the faith. When you walk around the streets, you have a crucifix on every corner, you have the stations of the cross, you have the mysteries of the rosaries in every corner, every house has the image of Our Lady above it, every house has the emblem of faith. But today, we are no longer in that kind of environment where the faith is being preserved. Does that mean we lose it? And that's why you see St. Thomas more. When he was about to be killed because he opposed that time the king. And he said that courage is the form of every virtue. It is a form of every virtue because it is a virtue you practice at any testing point. At the point of testing. So you love, but you do love when it's nature to love. But inside of them, perhaps were liberal ideas. And that's why every bishop who was in the Second Vatican Council perhaps says the Latin Mass in the morning. You see? So it's not just keeping the faith when it's convenient, it's to keep it at all times. Whenever it's convenient, whenever it's not convenient. And so, the excommunications are valid, right? And the sacraments remain valid. Because our Lord Jesus Christ has not changed from one human judgment to the other. And then the next question is, who is Bobini and was he really a Freemason? Yes, he was a Freemason. That is, there's a member of Freemasonry converted to the Catholic faith, a former member of Freemasonry, and he said that he's on the register for the P2 Lodge of Freemasonry. The P2 Lodge of Freemasonry was in charge of the propaganda of the Freemasonic ideas. That was his work. To basically change people's minds on those things they kept firmly as Catholics. That was his role. And it's said that even the Pope later on discovered that this was, I don't think he discovered, I think he always knew, but it's not for me to judge. But yes, the Mass we have was given to us. Before you have a Mass that was given to you by the saints, the Latin Mass, given to you by the Holy Spirit, your Lord Jesus Christ, and on the other hand, somebody is trying to hand you a Mass written by a Freemason. And I think you should read the book of Bishop Marcel Lefebvre, and you see when he describes how Bobini was describing the Mass, that there was a council of all superiors of congregations, and he was the superior of the spiritual presence. And Bobini presented the Mass, the new Mass. And one monk asked him, but this Mass I can say it in 7 minutes. And the answer of Bobini was, we find something to add. We'll add something. As if it was so. You know the way when the producer of music tells you it has to be 3.5 minutes, so if you start adding you add something so it comes to 3.5 minutes. You see? And that is the kind of spirit that the Mass was written. There's even stories, like I think he mentioned or talked to someone in confidence, that as he was going for presenting the Mass, I think, to the Pope, that one of the Eucharistic prayers, he wrote it in the train on a tissue paper. So you have on one side a Mass given to us by the Holy Spirit, our Lord Jesus Christ, the saints, and on the other side, the Mass of communion. Let's call it what it is. It's a mass of communion. And put into mind the temptation of Esau. When Esau, who had the birthright, who had the proper birthright, and what does Jacob ask him? What good is it to have a birthright when you're hungry? And what does Esau exchange his birthright for? Giveri. He says Giveri because it's better to eat and to be full than to have a birthright. And today we speak of the sons of Jacob. We speak of the God of Jacob. Why? Because Esau let it all go. It was rightly his by birth, but he exchanged it for quarters. So how can we now say we want to exchange the mass of all time with a mass that has come from Freemasons? That is impossible. As Catholics, we can't do that. And anybody wants to look at it, go look at it. It's there. He even wrote a whole book, it's called On the Liturgy, explaining everything you need in the Mass. He said in that book, we have to remove from the Mass everything that has stumbling block the Protestants. Everything. So, is it really remaining a Protestantized Mass? It's not the Catholic Mass. The Catholic Mass is one holy Catholic apostolic. What we have to receive, what we believe has to be received. Our faith is not something that we choose. We don't wake up one morning and say, today we are here to believe of this and thinking like that. Our faith is something given, and given for us to believe. Then there's the last part. When we see the FSSPS priest giving, like they did back by the first bishops by Scott. So let's expect here in 2003. So it's 88 or no, there's no SSPS priest here, permanent. But I think Father Williamson used to come to see Mass from 76 for some few faithful. So yeah, the SSPS is here to stay. As long as we are here to be sanctified by the needs. And of course, for me, I'm sure I'll always be here. So I'm given the necessity to be here. And then the last thing is about necessity. So, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, what is necessary can be looked at in two ways. So something is necessary either because you cannot do without it, like food. You cannot do without it. Without food, you will starve to death. Or secondly, it's necessary when it makes the accomplishment of a thing easier. So I can walk from here to Kisumu, but it would be better to use a horse, and better to use a car, and better to use a plane. So as more complex it becomes, the more necessary a thing is. Okay? So St. Thomas Aquinas says that on the part of God, things are necessary in the second way. Okay? God is free. Christ did not need to die on the cross, really, according to God, on the part of God, to save us. And so if God has chosen that Christ must die on the cross and that he must give us the Mass, it's because on God's part, that is the most suitable, most efficient, most sweet and easy way to save us. God is efficient. I'm a builder. If I build a house, I give you a stairs, I give you a lift, right? God is more wise than me. He gives you the easiest way to go to heaven. And so can you imagine what necessitated our salvation, that Christ had to die on the cross for us to be saved? That is how necessary it was. You would have taken a breath, you would have just been born, and you would have been saved. But on our part, things are not necessary in the same way. On the part of God, He is free because God is God. But on our part, whatever means God has given us, they remain the only means of our salvation. When He gave us Christ, it was because that was the only way. He was giving us the perfect and most suitable way for our salvation. If He has given us the Mass, it's because there is no other way to save us. And that's why you can see after when the Mass is being canonized, the Council of Trent says that the omnipotence of God could not have done better. St. Thomas Aquinas says, if the salvation of man were the salvation of God, he wouldn't have done one thing more. So that has to show that the work of salvation that God has done is complete. It does not need any additional additions. The same way I can say clearly, the Bible does not need one more paragraph. It does not need one more book. Everything has been given for us to be saved. And for us, we don't have to choose between one thing or the other. So when these priests like Bogini are coming in with a new way, a different way other than the one which the omnipotence of God has given us, you see the challenge is that they're actually standing in opposition to the omnipotence of God. I have done everything to save man, and now here, these men want to do something different, which is more conforming to the world. And if you look at the Bull of Greenwood, when it's canonized the Mass, at the last sentence it says that those who don't obey this precept will face the wrath of the apostle, the wrath of God, and that of the apostle, Peter and Paul. And that's why I'm saying, if really you're scared that the bishop has done this or that, imagine facing Paul. You're afraid, yes, you're afraid that the bishop has done this. But here you have, on one side, a warning. Anybody who goes against this will face the wrath of God and that of Peter and Paul. And on the other side, someone with ulterior motives tells you that basically they don't want you to recognize you as a Catholic. You're more afraid of that than the former. I think we need to have a true appreciation of what we really feel. It's true, the bishops have the authority, but this authority is not an absolute authority. They cannot use the mission, they cannot destroy the mission of Christ within the jurisdiction. When Christ, in the last verse of the book of St. Matthew, he gives both the mission and jurisdiction. Go forth. I give you all power, go forth and teach them all that I have taught you. He gives them both the jurisdiction and the mission. The jurisdiction is given for the mission, not against it. So the Pope has been given all authority, yes, from God, but not to do his own agenda, not to take us to religious liberty and to make us fulfill the sustainable development goals. That's not where the authority of the Pope should be directed towards. The unity of the Pope is to unite us around the faith. And if the Pope is uniting us around the UN or around, the liberty, fraternity, all that, that is not about faith. The Pope's task is to unite us around the faith. And if you see the Pope not uniting us around the faith, then when you follow what the faith has always taught, you're not on the road. Yeah. So that is how I would answer that. Thank you.
Question of how Africans, Kenyans, understand that incarceration actually harms our faith. But the Latin Mass is what evangelist Africa. So incarceration is the idea of subjecting or adapting the Christian theology and liturgy to the cultures of the people, cultures of the people especially. So we can say that our Catholic faith is not confined to a particular culture, it's not confined to a particular people, it's Catholic. It needs to be for all people, all times, of all places. It's universal. So you can't be subjected to one particular or adapted to particular people with their native cultures there's no need of bringing in the church, the liturgy, or one of our daily occupations. We see this, especially in Africa, incarceration is especially expressed in music. Music is expressed in the liturgy, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help the worship of God. Why? Because this music is very passionate. It excites the passions. It doesn't elevate the mind of God like pure chant that we have in the Latin Mass. You can see the work of missionaries when the early 20th century in central Kenya and Mukabani and other places, that in 50 years they crossed vast lands, evangelizing and building churches, converting people in 50 years. The work is still evident today. Vatican II, this has slowed down because of the incarceration. We see people today who are Catholics, but they are not in depth of their faith as it should be. Many people, especially people who are serious in their life, they are frustrated when they go to worship, either in the Protestant church, in the Catholic church, because there's lack of depth in the worship, the sort of superficial things are in the church. And the fruits of this today is, especially men, they group together, they say they're not going back to that religion of Jesus Christ again. Let us go back to what our grandfathers and our fathers were doing. Let us get a goat, make a shrine, we slaughter, we operate to God, and this is our God. Let us stop worshiping the God of our soul. And this is right today. Because when they go to Mass or they go to place of worship, they see childishness and lack of seriousness in the living of this worship. So they think, let us do what our grandfathers were doing. And many men today have abandoned the religion. They have apostatized. And the Catholic Church, I think, is the biggest casualty. And these men are marrying women of right minds, so that children not become Christians at all, will never be baptized. That's the whole generation which will be lost, because without Christ, there is no salvation. Of course, these people, they think that what they're doing is right, because they say you're worshiping God and that's enough for us. But we know after the death of Christ on the cross, we have to believe in Christ so that we can be saved. And because of this incarceration, many people have left the church and they're seeking their own way to satisfy their desire to worship God. The way they give it's okay for them. And at the same time, the modern Catholic Church, when they see that, they say, okay, if you choose worship God that way, why not? It's okay. If you're worshiping one God, it's no problem. So only Latin Mass or traditional Latin Mass can unite all people together, not religion, which is bringing souls to heaven. There's one small question here, not very big. If it has been answered, someone is asking about the fate of our people in Dar es Salaam and in Tanzania. You know that we got the many boys of Christians here. We have a family who are very dedicated and do not go to the new Mass. So the same way we say here, we continue to go to Dar es Salaam to celebrate Mass there. And you know of late that the Archbishop of Dar es Salaam also was a letter of Nairobi. I don't know why, because this 100 traditional families in Dar es Salaam was a bit exaggerated. And let me say, cautious. But whenever you attend, you always go to visit
consecrations would go on, which he had been explaining for a year prior in previous correspondences with Rome, letters which he'd been sending to Pope Leo and to Cardinal Fernandez, explaining why there was a need for the consecrations. How do we respond to the allegation of disobedience? So, two ways. One, by saying, yes, it was disobedient, but explaining why, the reasons why. And the other way is, philosophically speaking, there's a way that you can explain that it wasn't actually disobedient. Both of them are by the same thing, because obedience to ecclesiastical authorities is subordinate to obedience to God and obedience to truth. So that always has to come first before the obedience to superiors. Obedience is very important. It's a very necessary virtue, but then it has to be rightly ordered. It has to be ordered to truth. So there is such a thing as just we cannot obedient to. And well, the word Pope means Papa, so probably the right analogy is like a family sort of situation, or analogy of looking at things and how children in a family, they owe their obedience to their father, but then there are limits to that obedience. So if a father commands his children to do anything which he says is for the good of the family, so for example, go and rob that bank, we need the money, right? I'm your father, you'll do well to obey me and go and rob that bank, or go and jump off that cliff, or any type of command which is unjust, right? There's another example of if a father tells his daughter to go into prostitution to bring money to the family, right? In all of those situations, the child would rightly say, I love you, I acknowledge you're my father, but I can't obey you when it comes to this, right? And they will be right in doing that. So obedience, as important as it is, it has its limits. As the other questions have come in, there have been a number of examples given of saints who are equally disobedient in a sense, right? During the persecutions in England, St. John Fisher, St. Thomas More, and their disobedience to King Henry, right? There's disobedience by other saints to their bishops as well. St. John of Arc is another one who even died in the state of excommunication, only for later on to be re-examined and seen that, she's actually a saint. And so obedience is subordinate to other virtues. Okay, so then there's some other questions. Regarding the excommunication, if it stands even after appealing, part 1, what should we expect? What can they do? What are they capable of doing to us in an attempt to enact their fake excommunication? Part 2, there was a clear issue with traveling for the ordinations this time. Rumors anytime one mentions that they attend the SSPX, it could be cause for some practical difficulties as well. I would put that outside the realm of possibility. And I think it's just about persevering through those difficulties to get to the goals we want to get through. And then being faithful, have people in their ear. So this part is quite painful when your loved ones are speaking to you as though you have a serious problem, and trying to want the best for you and to rescue you from this situation of being a formal adherent to the schism of the society, as they are calling us. I'd say we just need to wear this as a badge of honor. We need to be convicted in what we're doing. Look at all the examples. We need to become more accustomed to the lives of the saints, and we'll find in their who are often misunderstood. St. Thomas More, for example, his family members couldn't fully understand why he was so committed to the principles. When everyone else, the entire country, was falling to the wayside, his family couldn't understand why couldn't he just sign up to these goals, but we have to read the lives of the saints. We'll get strength by reading their accounts and how they went through those moments of isolation. We have to deepen our prayer life, we have to deepen our sacramental life, and we have to know that it's not our job to convince people that we are right. It's not our job to convince them. So just simply trying to, if they ask, explain the position, explain to them, because there's so much misunderstanding. Many people think that it's just language, or we hate our own customs, or all those sorts of things, but explaining the deeper situation that it's not just about the language, it's about the entirety of how the Mass was changed, the structure of the Mass, the essence of the Mass, everything about the Mass, how that changed. It's about the faith, how the faith pre the council was versus how it is post the council, and so on, explaining all these various aspects to them. It doesn't mean you convince them or that the next Sunday they'll come with you here, but then at least you'll have defended your position, and then you be at peace with that, and then again find strength in the numbers that we have. They find strength in having people like you as well, and coming for these conferences and learning more, asking questions. So
I'll finish up. I'll make my last contribution and further comment. How do we deal with the online debates with friends and family? Do we engage on the discussions and debates to defend the society as an act of spiritual work of mercy is to counsel the ignorant, or we ignore them as an act of prudence so that we avoid anger, pride, etc. So both are actually good ways to address the debates. It depends on your disposition. If you are disposed to anger, pride, it's better to ignore and keep quiet and use other higher means. Because actually in the soul of the apostolate, when it comes to the apostolate, the most important thing is the example we give, our prayer life, and then how the words we can teaching basically. So giving a good example as a Catholic, especially to your family, they need to see Christ in us. If my siblings don't see Christ in me, and then I'm telling them I'm in the true religion, it's a bit of a contradiction itself. And also, in our day-to-day contact, let people know that they're living with a traditional Catholic, because we are honest, we are diligent, we are hardworking, and faithful also not only to God but also to men. So that good example is more important than even any discussion we can have with them, because you can be a scandal to people while keeping the faith while not practicing it. At the end of the day, the faith is a practical thing. It's not something intellectual, merely intellectual. It's an assent of the mind, but in order to cultivate the will, so that you can do the good. So that is what our faith is. And for those who are violent, there are some people who are very violent, as Greg has mentioned. You find a situation where someone is worried for you. You know the way our Lord says, they are trying to remove the speck in your brother's eye, while not concerned about the log in yours. So we find like one of the people who was concerned and was communicated was a Protestant. An actual Protestant, worried that he was communicated. I wonder now, you belong to a sect. You're outside the church completely, and you're worried that you understand what I mean. So you find you're defending tradition to someone who has still a lot to learn. A lot to learn. And so you have to be also not charitable, right? Understand that it is because the log is in the eye and they can't see really that what is actually on your eye is a speck. You know, they can easily be blinded. They are blinded by the majority. We don't today live in a democratic world. The majority is always right. You know? The majority has chosen, because they say the will of the man of people is the will of God. So whatever men people have chosen, God has chosen. And so this has become that truth is democratic. And in a state where we are in, we are the minority report. We are the dissenting opinion. When you go online to fight, just know it's 1 versus a million, right? You're the one, there are a million on the other side. But also remember the story of Gideon. When he goes to God to ask for more soldiers, he has 35,000 soldiers, and God tells him they're too many. And he is one that they came for more. We wanted to be more. Of 35,000 versus 60,000, the enemy has 60,000. And he goes back and gets rid of the cowards. 20,000 people leave because they don't want to participate in the war. He comes back confident, now we're 10,000, we're fine. And God tells him, no, you're too many. So he doesn't understand why they come to pray. My prayer was for more. Every time I come back, I need to reduce my army. And then he comes back with 300, and he has a dream, and God tells him, today I will deliver the Amalekites to you. And you see, the lesson of that was that when he had 1:2, 35,000 against 60,000, he just thought his soldiers were very strong. And 1:6, 10,000 against 60,000, he just thought they're very bright, that they can strategize and defeat a big enemy. But with 300, God says, you know it is me. That it is impossible. So it is because we are with God, in our minority report, that we are actually confident. The confidence of the Maccabees brothers was not in their numbers. Actually, if you read the book of Maccabees, which I recommend to all of you, read the book of Maccabees and you'll see the lessons that we should have as traditional Catholics, as Catholics want to just keep the faith. And it is not by numbers that God wins. So our confidence is really that we are with God, and not just because we are many of you. So the best way to respond to these debates is, of course, with charity, with gentleness and firmness, and only out of respect for truth. When you see that it's becoming violent, it's better to stay away. Pray for the person and keep off. Because you only defend the truth for the sake of the truth. You only do it out of respect for truth. But the humble thing is not to enter now into the second level convinced that had you been in the same position as that person, perhaps you'd be worse. You have to be convinced about that if it's not for the mercy of God, we'll be worse than all these people who are attacking us. The bishops, the priests, the faithful. If not for the mercy of God, we'll be worse. And so it's purely by God's mercy that we are what we are. And just myself, it's very particular because for 1 year, I was those people. For 1 good year, I was those people. Whenever I remember one time I saw the picture of the first Mass of Father John. I can't tell you what went through my mind. Even today, I'm embarrassed whenever I see Father John. That was before I knew him. I was thinking, what's wrong with this man? How can you give your life for a Schismatic group? You know? That was what was in my mind. And so I understand the position they are in. And if not for the mercy of God, I would easily be one of them. Easily. And all of us would be. And so because God has given us the grace of life and the grace of strength, this grace of strength comes with a lot of grace towards us, others who have a big log in their eyes. I had that log, and it's only God who can remove it, right? So the way we do it is by praying for them and giving them a good example. So when you answer them, just write it as if you are answering yourself. If you are the one who wrote that, if they say something mean or abusive or angry, just think, I would have told you the one who had said this. And even if it's missing some vulgar language, I would have done worse than this. And give a charitable answer. But if you think this person is going to help, then you'd rather not even answer them because that's very pride is coming in, you see. And then over here, I've just been given this paper by Elvis. It's a visit of the third, interestingly, in July of 1963 to Kenya. And it describes every day what he did, the masses, tens of thousands of people attending the Mass at the Basilica, here at the Cathedral, saying Mass at St. Mary's. He drove to Kwale and said Mass to the students. He had a visit to the seminary, and they read for him some kind of a letter in Latin. So they received an address in Latin from the students, the gifts of paintings. So this is the one who was excommunicated. This is the one, in the last part it says that this covers Father General's all too short visit with us. He has left us with the happiest of memories and a sincere feeling of filial regard. This is how they felt when the third left on the 13th of July. He came on the 5th of July and his trip started on the 1st of July. The same day as the consecration, 63 years ago. And 60 years later, we're sitting here talking to him, defending him as not being a reprobate or a rebel, right? You can see how things have changed. For the same things he did on this day, that left in his conference a sincere feeling of filial regard and happiness of memories, today it's something that is causing them disgust. For the same things. Because in this letter, he celebrated solemn pontifical mass for them. He celebrated masses for the sisters, visited the convent. The same things which our priests do today, he did. And it was praised. Why is it causing a different feeling? I think it's our hearts that have changed, not him. Because his spirit lives strong in his heart, our priests. Thank you.
What is the next move for our faithful? I think Father Zagarani has answered this question this morning. Telling you is to keep the faith. The faith is your light, is your direction. Just keep the faith. This is your duty. Your duty is not duty is not nothing else than to save your soul. And to save your soul, you need to keep the faith, you need the grace of God, you need the sacraments. And for you, your duty is to stay as good Catholic. Someone is asking another question: what should I do to be reintegrated in the Catholic Church? What are the conditions required by the Church for the legal school to be welcomed into other Catholic churches? No, actually, it's not exactly the question, but you know, you are Catholic. You are Catholic, you are fully Catholic. It means you are Catholic everywhere. And you don't have to introduce yourself as I am excommunicated. I am a citizen. Okay, I belong to a church. No, you are Catholic, and there is no fear about it. Okay? Just keep your faith and keep coming at the cross, of course, to receive good doctrine, good teaching, good sacraments. This is for your next move. Don't move. Are we going to have more outstations apart from Nairobi? Yes, I hope. I hope it will come. It's all time. We just need a bit of more vocation. We are working on it. Okay, you can see some black person there. We are working on more vocations, and that will be probably the source of new, not outstations, new priorities. Then, those people can take advantage of that to divorce. And this is why we were asking the school to sign a special in a special process, and they were acknowledging the validity of their marriage, knowing how they were doing it. That they cannot after it's still good because there is not really caring for this song. But the bishop of Nairobi is okay. They will not cheat God that they are judgment.
I don't have a question to answer. There was a few things in the last question to the bottom. Someone was asking how you should introduce yourself. You should actually introduce yourself as I used to be a modern Catholic, I'm a traditional. It's a very good introduction because people ask, what's the difference? What is the difference between you and us? When you meet people, they ask you, are you still going to Holy Cross? Don't be scared. Don't say, now we got it. Tell them yes. And they ask you, do you need to hear that the bishop said you should not go there? Then you can give the reasons that we are saying here. We are saying these things so that you can, in your own language, not in Mariana's language, in your own words, you can explain yourself easily. And I said, go there because I have a Latin Mass. The priest said that we are not excommunicated, that it's not is to be invalid, what is invalid. I'm sure many Apostle Catholics speak about validity, they have no idea what they're speaking about. Even as congregations already, what is that? She, what is that? Never this will happen. Maybe the bishop knows and priest, but I don't think. If they ask you, are you excommunicated? Can you ask them, what do you mean by that? If they're scared by Protestant, they ask you what should be done. So don't be scared. Don't be afraid. You're confirmed. Now you can defend the faith without you know so much after all these years. So don't feel that you have to hide yourself so that you don't hold it also. Don't shoot your good imagine for us we have to walk with the hands of I'm a mystical to the Basilica. You know, when I was studying in 2013, it was the time when we had the movement of this and now people were saying, who's are the married priests? And I asked them, if you show me my wife, I will finish. Even in my village, some people still believe that we are the married priests. Because that was the word. I remember one time, it was very contagious. And the woman was approaching me, is that your son? You know the woman? So, yes. I didn't ask anything else. She believed I'm a virgin. Don't care about the judgment. You know that people are saying that one of the priests. I don't know why I'm married to this. Also another thing, you know, it is called Schismatic, in the history of the church, in the Schismatic group, they never kept the liturgy at the beginning. They never went to the goods of the church and said, these are rules. The Latin Mass, the sacraments that they have. They always, the Schismatic, they always looking for freedom from the law. Either they want to get married or to get life very easily and yeah, like that. So it's not really, when you read a Schismatic, it's very because they have the treasures of the church. The most treasure of the big. So someone asked me a question yesterday, I didn't answer it. It's a bit tricky and sensitive. But it's a question. I want to answer this question. Such have to be better providence and necessity. But he already have two bishops. I mean, before that. Why would he not wait for one?
Now we can say, now there's real necessity, now it has a providence.
Good year, Father.
1, 2.
You see him. Spanish take your victory well. That's not normal for his age to be for that kind of history. So saying the question was who would continue to run, give confirmations and abstentions.
Feel our faith. Not because we believe in the providence of God that we stay at home and we sleep the whole day. That's it. It's the same for the bishop. God wants us to be favorable. Even 2 bishops, they were teaching, and they had to travel a lot everywhere in the world to provide for all confirmations. Last time I heard Bishop Ferret, when he passed, he made confirmation, I think, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and Monday somewhere else. These big, big ceremonies. And they are old. And they have to do that in so many places in the world. But I think the necessity was already there. Of God wants us to be anymore because there are only one bishop at the week, and very good balance. Actually, it is true. The superiors wanted for the necessity evident enough. To reach the stage visibility. And before to do this act, but I think we reached there. It was a better. I think we had a good session. Thank you for being there. I hope we have answered at least most of your questions. But don't hesitate to address the priest, to address the panel. You can speak with the seminarians also. Okay? I will be happy to also answer some questions if you have some other questions that have not been answered properly, or if you want to have further discussions. Thank you so much, and let us pray.
One comment. Very, very good to be the same company with our was could try to question the merits of our mother. So in the right side, you know that but something that history has recorded, and it is known. If today you go and read about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bomb was dropped 1 kilometer, not more, from where the house of the Jesuits lived. Everything in kilometers was incinerated. Did you know what incinerate means?
Yes.
It became into dust, except this church, except this house that housed the Jesuit priests. One was thrown up, he was hit. None of them died. In touch with that bomb, you don't live for long, and you die a very painful death. Everyone, thousands and thousands in that radius, all died. This one church, this one place where the Jesuit priests were survived. So you can say God knows His own, and the people who survived were many, maybe even not 1%. The 5 or 6 of them were 0.00% of those who died. So we have to think for ourselves at the end of our lives that God will stand with us. It's not, can you imagine a bomb that leveled everything? Just look at the pictures. You don't need to. Me, the only thing I said, okay, maybe I'm being very right. He knows us, we are not that strong, but anyway, that was okay.
Gloria.